Welcome to Parenting Special Needs Live. I'm Shantae, and today we are honored to have Dr. Temple Grandin and Dr. Debra Moore here to discuss with us their new book, Navigating Autism, 9 Mindsets to Help Kids on the Spectrum. So, and those of you that may not be familiar, I can't imagine anybody would not be familiar with Dr. Temple Grandin, but in case you're not, Dr. Temple Grandin is a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. She is known for her trailblazing work as a spokesperson for people with autism and her lifelong work as with animal behavior. She has sought to understand her own autistic mind and the different ways of thinking and to share that knowledge with the world in order to help others. She is one of the most respected experts in both autism and animal behavior in the world. And we are thrilled to have her. And she's also here with her co-author, Dr. Debra Moore, who is a psychologist with several decades of experience working with children, teens, and adults on the spectrum. She has co-authored 2 books with Dr. Grandin, The Loving Push, How Parents and Professionals Can Help Kids on the Spectrum Become Successful Adults, and their newest book, Navigating Autism, 9 Mindsets to Help Kids on the Spectrum, which was released last week. So we're excited to have you all. So welcome, Dr. Temple Grandin and Dr. Moore. How are you? I'm so thrilled to have you all.
Just fine.
Well, thanks for having us.
So can you share with us or start the conversation by telling us about the purpose of the new book and your intention and why it might be important? I know there's like 3 questions in that, but let's just start with a conversation about telling us about the purpose of the new book.
I think Temple and I both want kids to reach their potential. I think we think that kids are often underestimated on the spectrum, and we want to be part of changing that. So the book is geared to professionals. It's also geared to educators, teachers, also geared to parents. And we go through mindsets to help you really see each child as their unique self, emphasize their strengths, very specific ways to do that, and bring out their potential, which we think there's a lot of, no matter what their quote unquote level of functioning is.
Well, I always like to make a comment. One of the big problems is people get locked into the label. And one of the things I've talked about in the past is different kinds of thinking, visual thinkers, mathematical thinkers, and word thinkers. And word thinkers in particular, I think, get locked into the label. And I think Navigating Autism would be especially helpful for parents of a newly diagnosed child, where they sort of go, it's a disaster. And one of the first mindsets in the book talks about looking at the whole child. Isn't just autism. The other thing I find in looking at kids with autism is you have a 2-year-old's not talking, you've got to get early intervention. And whether that 2-year-old's going to learn to talk, well, you don't know at that stage. You have to get really good early intervention. Then you get kids, maybe a 10-year-old who had little or no speech delay, gets diagnosed late in elementary school because he has no friends. You see, at that point, autism is just turning into a personality variant, especially when there's no speech delay. See, the problem we've got now, the doctors kept changing the guidelines. It used to be autistic, the child had to have speech delay and the other autistic features, repetitive behavior, lack of social interaction. Then the Asperger's designation came in the early 90s, and that had no obvious speech delay. So socially awkward, no speech delay. Now it's all merged together, which I think is a big mess, because you're putting Elon Musk right here, who's autistic, Elon Musk, in the same category as somebody that remains nonverbal. This is the problem. And one of the biggest problems I see is overgeneralizing about the label, especially if a kid gets diagnosed at an older age than maybe 2 or 4 years old. Just getting locked into the label. I'm seeing moms of teenagers. The kid's doing well in school, but mom can't let go, and the kid has never gone shopping. And then I've worked out in the construction industry for 25 years. We were installing equipment in these big meatpacking plants, And I worked with high-end skilled tradespeople and people that own metalworking shops where they'd be landed right straight in special ed today.
Mm,
I'm kind of going back and forth between two worlds here.
right. And I did catch that you, on one of your other interviews, you said something which I think is really important too, is they don't have a lot of those hands-on skills any longer, or in classes. Like, you know, when I know when I was in high school, I took home ec, not home ec, I'm talking about building materials and things like that. So they don't have a lot of those skills such as welding and that kind of stuff that teach the kids. It's more academics, where some kids might be better with what they're interested in.
Well, the thing is, I think if people ask me if I could change one thing in the schools, I'd put all the hands-on classes back in. When I was in elementary school, my school had woodworking, sewing, art. I absolutely loved those classes. When I was a teenager, I was building all kinds of things. No, I think it's the worst thing they've ever done. In fact, I'm concerned, very concerned about losing skills.
Yeah.
And you know, yeah, you do need to learn read and write, but I've seen people with 6th grade education, an old-fashioned 6th grade education, reading and writing and arithmetic, the way it used to be taught, running big businesses, big businesses. You see, I'm kind of give a different perspective where I've worked in the construction trades and the companies that build things, you know, building big complicated factories. And the special ed department builds the stuff. And we need that stuff.
It's so important when Temple talks about different kinds of thinking. We're a society that values verbal thinkers. And that's really unfortunate because we gear our educational system towards verbal thinkers. Most of the therapists out there are verbal thinkers. Most of the educators are verbal thinkers. You know, the folks who used to teach those hands-on classes were probably not verbal teachers. The person who taught welding in wood shop were probably visual thinkers, and that was a good match. But the world has become very verbally oriented, and that's leaving out a really, really valuable learning opportunity for our kids.
Well, the problem is these are jobs that are needed, and I'm talking high-end skilled trades. And also, it's not for everybody. But if you're not exposed to it, then you don't know what you could be good at. You know, I've looked into a lot of career development, and students get interested in careers they get exposed to. And though they might get exposed to a career, well, I really hate that. It's also important to learn that. But the problem is verbal thinkers tend to overgeneralize. One of the things I found about verbal thinkers, they overgeneralize, where my kind of mind thinks in specific examples. And then I form concepts by grouping specific examples sort of into boxes on a spreadsheet. You know, my mind's sort of like an Excel spreadsheet. I am a bottom-up thinker.
Interesting. Now, and I know, and I don't know if this is a mindset because I'm sure it's one of them, but can you talk about, I overheard in an interview that I watched with you about strengths and the difference between strengths and interests. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought the way that you said it. So could you talk on that?
Yeah, I can definitely talk on that. A strength would be something like visual thinking. Okay, for me, that showed up in the form of art. I also like to build things and make things. So those are two characteristics that visual thinkers have, usually starting in 2nd or 3rd grade, not the real little kids. And the mathematical kids often are good at music, and they're also good at math. And if they're good at math, they need to be moved ahead. And then the verbal thinkers, of course, are good with words. And these differences will show up if you expose a student to enough different things. You would see the things that the kid could be good at. If you take all that stuff out of the schools, then it's not possible to see it.
Right. And what is the difference? I mean, in your
okay, well then, okay, sorry, I didn't finish the question. So a strength would be visual thinking, math thinking, music, word thinking. Okay, an interest would be horses, cars, for example. And so the visual thinker might draw pictures of horses. That'd be me. A word thinker would just write about horses. Okay. Or maybe they love statistics, catalog all the different breeds of horse. So there'd be different ways that you could express an interest in horses, cataloging all the different breeds and maybe where they originated from, the kind of thing that a verbal autistic kid would do. It's highly verbal. My kind of minds just want to draw pictures of them. And so you want to take those interests and broaden it out. So that maybe you read about horses. You can do math with horses. In other words, link, or cars, where you link, make an associative link back to the thing that they're interested in. So an interest would be horses or cars. A skill would be art, mechanical ability, music, mathematics, writing. Those are skills.
And the power is when you combine an interest and a strength or a skill together, then a kid can go, you know, and run with that. So what I tell parents is find an interest of your child. Let's say it's trains, and sometimes sit down and make a list of 20 things that might be connected with trains. So you could take the sounds that trains make. You could take the cities that trains go to. How are trains constructed? Who works on a train? What are the names of trains? What are the materials that are made? What's the history of trains? And depending upon what your child's way of thinking is, you know, you're not going to have a non-visual thinker spend a lot of time drawing trains. That would be fruitless. But pair up their interest and expand it like Temple's mom did. She couldn't just keep drawing the horse's head. She had to draw other parts of the horse in different environments, expand that interest, because the kid's not necessarily going to do it by themselves. Temple probably would have kept drawing that horse's head for a long time, and that wasn't helping her grow. But her mom was smart and took it a step further. So that's what parents need to do, but you can't just assume that those ideas are going to come to you. I think you need to proactively and very intentionally sit down and actually make a list of the connections.
Yeah. Now, in your book, do you guys have lots of lists and lists? Yeah.
We do. We do. We're kind of, somebody used the word detective. I don't think we used it in the book, but I think it's a good description. We kind of help people be detectives of kids. So we've got checklists and questionnaires you can go down to kind of fine tune the information that you have about your child, and so that you don't miss things also.
Well, another point I want to bring up is that some people might say, what's the scientific basis for the different kinds of minds? Well, I actually go into the science in my book, The Autistic Brain. Now, that's been published a number of years ago, but the original studies on the different kinds of thinking, especially the object visualizer like me and the visual spatial mathematical mind, are in the reference list and talked about in The Autistic Brain. But there's been a whole bunch more real recent studies that just reinforce it even more. As I'm collecting more and more research, it's getting more and more evidence-based. Now, the thing is, a lot of people are mixtures of the different kinds of minds. Someone who gets an autism label tends to be more extreme on one of them. But even in so-called regular people, there's usually one kind that's sort of dominant, but I've interviewed hundreds of people and there are definitely mixtures.
And what about, I know that you guys have talked before about, you know, what do kids who just want to play video games, and like nowadays everybody's just getting involved. I mean, actually we went away last weekend and it was just shocking to me. I mean, everywhere you go, everybody's on iPad videos. I mean, little kids at the breakfast table were sitting there with their iPads, you know.
That's the reason why I came out with this book, The Outdoor Scientist. We've got to get kids off of these devices, because what I'm seeing with autistic kids is kind of when they grow up on the fully verbal end of the spectrum, they got two paths where they're going: to the basement to play video games, that probably on a disability check, or get out and have a life. And we've got to limit the video game playing. I'll tell you what Elon Musk was doing. He was selling video games, making them and selling them. And I checked out his age, and I went back and I looked at the trailers for the video games that he would have played as a teenager, and they were old clunky old Mario the Plumber things. They were not very addictive. What if he'd been 10 years younger? What would have happened? The games would have been a lot more addictive.
Yeah, I think what parents need to know is that, you know, there are billions of dollars that go into developing these video games to be as addictive as possible. It's not by chance that these video games end up the way they are. And we've got the research, we cited in the book.
Yeah, you cited also in A Loving Push. And
Yes.
I've looked at more recent research, and people on the autism spectrum are definitely more likely to get addicted to video games. I won't have any of that stuff on my computer, on my phone, because what little I've played of them, they're a drug.
And the developers out in Silicon Valley will not let their kids play either, or they will limit it very drastically. If you read any interviews, they know how toxic it is. It's not easy to get kids off once they get stuck. It's possible, and you have to do it gradually, and you have to replace it with another behavior, but it's not easy.
Well, where there's been 3 successes that I ran into just at various autism meetings that I've been at, where severe video game addict young adults were weaned off with auto mechanics, which kind of tells me that it's likely it's my kind of mind. They gradually did it, and they found out the motors and the engines were more interesting than the video games. Has to be done slowly. And one of those guys is fixing trains for the railroad now, and they love them.
And I want to just ask about this because I have not read the book. The book copy went to Michelle, the other person that works with us. And but anyways, I wanted to just mention, like my daughter, we got to go on a trip recently and no devices. She didn't bring her phone or her iPad. She was like a different, and she is on the spectrum, but she was like a different child. And so I'm just thinking that those phones and the iPads, I'm sure, just increase anxiety in our kids as well, like the beeping and the constant, call this person, whatever. So I don't know if that's something that's mentioned.
Well, there's also, you need to have time together, because okay, in the 50s, we had family meals together, and I wasn't allowed to bring toys or books to the table. This was the time that everybody is going to tell about their day and take turns telling about it, where you were taught table manners. And I think there was some advantages about that, a lot of teachable moments. So if I stirred my drink with my finger, Mother didn't scream no, she'd say use the spoon. She'd give the instruction. And we spent so much time out playing. And that's why I did books like The Outdoor Scientist, and then another one, Calling All Minds. That's my childhood aviation projects are in there. Also, Paper Snowflake. I mean, kids aren't doing even things like this. When I did a book signing for Calling All Minds, I found out that 20 or 30% of the children, and this was 4 years ago, had never made a paper airplane. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Dr. Moore, do you want to give us more of an overall, like what you think, parents can gain from this book? And I want to ask you guys, because we're not just specific in the audience that we serve is not just specific autism. But from talking with you all and listening and reading some of the things up on this book, to me, it seems like it would help all children. It didn't seem like it would just be, I know it was, but to me, it seemed like there's a lot of that information would help regardless of what your child's diagnosis is. So can you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, if your child has no diagnosis, it's just a guide to bringing out potential in people, period. And, there are certainly specific things about making sure that you're not missing any medical conditions that are associated with autism. Those medical conditions are associated with a lot of special needs. So yes, that would be a broad application. We also talk about psychiatric or emotional conditions often associated, anxiety being by far number one. That applies to lots and lots of kids. And sensory issues apply to lots and lots of kids. So we have checklists and questionnaires there. The other part, there's kind of 3 parts to the book. One is the questionnaires and the checklist, and the other is the research-based citations, so that you can really see we're not just pulling this out of our hat. And the other is examples, so that you can really see the specifics of kids. And we'll take oftentimes 2 kids and compare one approach with another approach. So I think, we wanted the book to be something that you could pick up at any point. You don't have to read it from front to back. You do it in any order. The second chapter, for instance, is on evaluations, making sure you get a whole child evaluation. And that's a good chapter to read if your child's getting their first evaluation or if they're getting a reevaluation at some point, to skim through that, maybe, take the questionnaires before you go in. You can use it that way as well, but it definitely applies to lots of kids.
Right. Okay. Well, any questions I did not ask that you guys would want, that you want to share about?
Well, I just want to say that I think if you go into working with a child, again, whether you're a parent or an educator or a clinician, with curiosity, with fascination, you're going to bring out the best of that child. And we sometimes get so focused on deficits. Diagnoses are by definition based on a deficit model, and it kind of steers us unwittingly to leave behind the strengths, to not give them equal due. So we want to change that. Kids are way underestimated. We've done a horrible disservice to kids with language difficulties and nonverbal kids by making some assumptions about their cognitive abilities, which is not necessarily true. We know that now. And, have fun. A kid's a kid. They have a lot of life beyond a label, and they didn't change from the kid they were yesterday. If they got diagnosed today, they're still the same kid, and enjoy them.
Well, the other thing is, I think it's hard sometimes, and I'm finding this with work with animals, to understand, for highly verbal people to understand that there is other kinds of thinking. I have, I do a lot of talks, diversity seminars for big corporations, and I talk about the different kinds of minds, the object visualizer like me, the mathematician mind, and the word mind. And they said, what do we do to be more inclusive? And I said, the first step is you have to realize that different styles of thinking exist. That's the first step. The other thing I have found in my work with these building these large factories is I went back to a whole bunch of my jobs, and I divided up how the engineering jobs were split up. And my kind of mind, the ones who can't do algebra, design all the clever equipment and lay out the whole entire factory. And may have 20 patents each on equipment. And the mathematician engineers do the boilers and the refrigeration, snow loads, power, water requirements. And you need to have the whole team in order to have the entire factory. For food processing plant, you've got to have that whole team there. And where we're losing it is the visual thinkers are playing video games in the basement, and they flunked algebra, so they couldn't even graduate from high school or take the welding class. But you can put, when you know about the different minds, and I'm looking at this from a business perspective, you can put teams of people together where it's complementary skills. And I kind of had a revelation on this just about a couple of years ago, when I took the jobs where I'd spent a lot of time on a construction site, and I kind of put them on a spreadsheet on a piece of paper. And I'm going, wow, that's the pattern. I don't care what meat company it was. I saw that same pattern on the big factory construction jobs.
So in order to make the changes, what do you guys think that we need to do as a society, like with parents and educators, be more open to different styles of learning? And, what would be your suggestions?
Well, everybody tends to get into their silos. And one thing I've tried to do is I do autism talks, but I'm still out doing some livestock things. I went to a brand new pork processing plant this spring. That was 2021. Brand new cold side where all the pork cut up. I checked the equipment. It came from Italy, Denmark, and Holland in shipping containers. They now cost $20,000 per 40-foot box, which is just ridiculous. But there's a real skills issue here too. And people ask me at the age of 74, what are some of the big things I'm promoting? One of the things I am very concerned about is my kind of mind's getting screened out. Because right now, to get a biology degree, I just got a very sad email 2 days ago, this is right now, from a guy trying to major in biology, and he's got to take calculus to major in biology. Yes, there are fields you need calculus. You're going to do orbital mechanics, you need calculus. In chemistry, you need algebra. But you have all these other things where you don't need it. You need the old-fashioned arithmetic, the way they used to teach it. And I'm very concerned that my mind's just, you see, educators don't know anything about factories or business. And I'm trying to like bring some of that world into educators. Because there's this whole world out there. Okay, take your Amazon warehouse. Oh yeah, I've looked at all the videos inside the Amazon warehouse. Plenty of equipment in there for me to work on. You know, the books don't come out of the computer, or whatever you order from there doesn't come out of a computer. This gigantic infrastructure. There's a lot of people in education who don't even think about that.
Right.
Well, the thing that's going to change some things is now the container to put the equipment from Holland in, instead of being a $2,000 truckload sized box on the spot market right now, it's a $20,000 box. Yeah, I find the supply chain issues right now, I find them super interesting. But there's a relationship here with things going on in education. We're going to need people here to build factories here. It's already starting to happen. Semiconductor plants. I missed out on a tour, big chip making factory. I was really disappointed that it's in Utah, Micron Technologies, but I got to see their video. And I'll tell you, there's plenty of equipment in there for me to work on. Yeah, the mathematicians, they got to be there too. But there's plenty of stuff in that factory where they'll need me. All kinds of moving things. You need both.
Need both.
And then you need the word thinkers to keep it organized. The word thinkers organize stuff. That's why my books have co-authors, because my mind needs organization. You see, that's different minds working together again. In fact, I'm working on a visual thinking book right now. And Betsy, my co-author, she's a total verbal thinker. I write the rough draft, she rearranges it. And Becky, our editor, she rearranges some more. I don't know how they do it, but when I read the final result, I really like it. But I'm providing the source material.
I think
And
that's
then Betsy sometimes adds some good things. But you see, this is an example of the different minds working together.
And I see that even in my own household, because I believe my husband is analytical, thinks in words, and I'm visual. And, I like more art, and I draw, and I see things in pictures, but it's hard sometimes because he will say things and he expects, so I'm even relating that to like education, like he thinks that it's only can be seen his way, where there's other ways to see things or other ways to do it. And so I can see like where it is like, people try to just say it's only one way, but there's more than one way to see things or to get to the same point sometimes.
That's the problem. And I think all this heavy emphasis on math, okay, if the mathematicians are in charge of some of the stuff, they're going to think that math thinking is essential for thought. It's not. And we get into some of the arguments about thinking in animals. And a visual thinker, animals do visual thinking. They do sensory-based thinking. Yeah, no, they're not going to fly a rocket to the moon. No way. We've got a bigger computer than they have. But you can have thought without mathematics or words. So your first step is realizing that.
Very interesting. So can you tell where the book 9 Mindsets to Navigating Autism, 9 Mindsets to Helping Children on the Spectrum, and it's available everywhere?
It's available on Amazon. It's available at any bookstore. If they don't have it, just let them know you want it. They will order it. I don't know if you held it up or not, but there's the book. And it's out now, just brand new.
Yes.
And
Just
easy to get.
Well, just to let everybody know, any bookstore can order any book you want. They all have a computer system where they can, you put an author title in, you can look at their books. I talked about the Outdoor Scientist and the Autistic Brain. Any book can be ordered from any bookstore.
You can support local.
Period. I mean, that they.
All right. Well, Dr. Temple Grandin and Dr. Moore, I know Dr. Debra Moore, thank you so much for being with us today. I think I want to get a copy of the book, so I will be ordering it. because I love the idea that it's more checklist and, simplified, and here's 9 steps to kind of help. And I really like that you also said about the younger parents when they're feeling overwhelmed and they just got the diagnosis and they're thinking that, kind of, oh, the overwhelmed part, where here's some things is pay attention to what interests your child and work towards those and build those skills versus concentrating on the, you guys said, deficits, which I think
Well, that's where I think where navigating autism can be the most helpful is the parents, like the kids kind of in shock over the diagnosis. And then some of my other books, like the Thinking in Pictures and the Way I See It, and I read those to get more specifics. But I really like the first concept in there about looking at the whole child and not getting label locked. And that's Debra Moore's term, not mine. I really like that term, avoid label locking.
I like that too. Avoid label locking. I love it. And don't get overwhelmed. Kind of look at the whole child and find what you can do to help their
Well,
be the best they can
that
be.
worries me is we got a lot of young people today totally removed from the world of the practical. I had a student in my class last semester who had never used a ruler to measure anything. They're totally removed from the world of the practical. They don't know where stuff comes from. Until they start seeing empty shelves in different places, then maybe they'll have to learn where stuff comes from.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you both so much for being with us today. Thank you all for being with us on Parenting Special Needs Live. Go get a copy of their book, and I didn't say thank you enough to Dr. Grandin for all the work that you do. I appreciate it, and that you're still out there educating everybody and sharing your life and your experiences with us so that we can all learn and do better and be better. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. I'm so sorry I was late, but thanks for having us.
No worries. And Dr. Moore, thank you as well. I appreciate everything that you've put together in the book, and thank you both. So in case no one has told you today, you are doing a great job. Be good to you, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.